So do you think virtual presentations are here to stay, and are you looking to make your virtual presentations even better? If you answered yes to either of both of those, you're in the right place. That's what we're going to be talking about in this session. How do we capitalize on virtual presentations, take them to the next level, and do what needs to be done in order to anchor ourselves in the customer's mind? Let's begin by asking you to complete this phrase for me. If I always do what I've always done, what's the rest of that? I'll have less than I've ever had before. There was a time when we could say, if I always do what I've always done, I'll always get what I've always got. Those days are over. What's happening is now technology is moving ahead. Demographics are shifting, new processes are coming along. We need to make sure that what we are doing is going to be cutting edge, state of the art, in order to stay ahead of what's going on. You see, it used to be that we could kind of sit still and maintain ourselves for a while, but now the world is moving ahead. Technology is changing, processes are changing, and for those of you who are in sales, your competitors are changing. So when we talk about being better, better than what? I plan on this webinar being better than the one that I did 2 days ago, but not as good as the one that I'm going to be doing in 3 days. Continuous quality improvement, CQI. That's where we need to focus. I don't want to be better than me. I want to be better than the resource my contact saw last time around. So let's start moving into this and see what we can learn. Here's the agenda that I have for this morning or for today. First of all, we're going to talk about change because change is inevitable. We need to gear ourselves up, not to change just for the sake of changing, but to make logical choices in what we're going to change and how we're going to go about doing it. And then we're going to talk about Viva, and I'll explain that in greater detail later on. Every presentation has two components, content and delivery. We're going to begin with delivery and then talk about content. And whatever time is left, we will spend it on Q&A. There are people who do Q&A, questions and answers. I think it's a little assumptive for me to think I would have the answers, so I have some ideas. Toward the end of the presentation, if you would, put your questions in the question box and we'll get to them if we can. And I will give you my ideas. I don't think I have the best answers, but I do understand that whenever two minds come together, a third mind is created. Whenever two minds come together, a third mind is created. And it's that third mind that we're looking for. It's how do we all go to the next level? How can we all do better tomorrow than we did today? To put your mind in the right frame, imagine that everyone in this session is thinking about going on a camping trip, and we want to have content here for everyone. There would be people in this session that have upgraded their RV for the 4th time, and there would be people who have never gone camping. So you would want to cover all the different elements. If you look at this video, there's a shelter, there's food, there's entertainment. What we're looking at again is CQI, continuous quality improvement. We're going to talk about the various elements of virtual presentations, what they are, and which ones you might want to change or improve. For everyone in this session, there will be something different you want to change. Some of you are very good at what you are doing. There's a gentleman on this call in this session that has done some remarkable things in technology. I'm amazed. He was in the middle of a Zoom session. The power went out. He got his session back up and running by running out to his truck, using his phone as a hotspot, using the AC power on the truck, and he got his thing going up again. If you're comfortable with that level of technology, then you probably don't need to focus so much on delivery, but you might want to make some changes in content. What can we do next? I live by a number of Chuckisms. There's a Chuckism on change that says there are two ways to respond to change: capitalize on it or capsize under it. Capitalize on it or capsize under it. The change is going to happen. We can't stop it. We can't change it, for lack of a better term. So we need to look at it and say, I'm either going to capitalize on it or I'm going to capsize under it. In order to make this decision, you will want to decide, is this particular change part of a cycle, part of a trend, or is it a fad? Is it part of a cycle? This comes around time and time again, and if it's going up, we want to ride the wave up, and if it's tipping and going down, we want to back away from it. Is it a trend? I believe that virtual presentations are a trend. They spiked up during the pandemic and the response to the pandemic. They have begun to taper as live presentations have come back into vogue, and they may uptick again if there's another pandemic. They may start going down, or they may grow at a gradual rate. And because of what we are seeing in productivity and profitability resulting from virtual presentations, I have a feeling this is a trend that's going to be around for a while. Another Chuckism is this: change is inevitable. Change brings opportunity. Therefore, change is an inevitable opportunity for somebody. It might as well be you. People are capitalizing on the change. When the pandemic hit, many companies shut down. Many of them laid off workers. Some of them dismissed workers entirely. Some businesses went out of business. But how many companies are thriving as a result of what happened during the pandemic? So we look at it and say the change is inevitable. Are we going to capitalize on it or capsize under it? And if we're going to capitalize on it, what changes do we make, and how do we go about making those changes? Let's do a 3-2-1. Speakers and trainers like me use all kinds of devices to hold people's attention and to get them thinking. Let's do a 3-2-1. We'll begin with three things that never change. And those are physical laws like gravity, truth doesn't change. We bend the truth, we hide the truth, but it never really changes, and human nature. And it's the fact that human nature doesn't change that we're going to build on as we look at improving our ability to do virtual presentations. Salespeople learned very quickly we had to move into virtual presentations, but now everyone is beginning to understand this is a great way to lead. This is a great way to go forward. This is a great way for school teachers. Although we like the classroom better, there are times when we have to use the virtual presentation. We'll talk about the strengths and limitations as we go forward. There are two types of people in the world. You've probably heard this before. There are two types of people in the world, those that break people into two types and those who don't. I happen to be one of those people who do. There are two types of people in the world, those who know they're in sales and those who don't. Those who know they are in sales and those who don't. Now, we all know we have to sell ourselves. But do you realize that if you have a great idea, you're going to have to sell it? Great ideas are a dime a dozen. The ones that come to fruition, the ones that grow, the ones that come into reality are the ones where the owner of the idea was able to sell it to other people. Everybody is in sales. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about in this session focuses on the sales arena, but primarily how you can use those principles to sell your ideas. Both of my sisters were school teachers. They were in sales. My father was a minister. He was in sales. The gentleman who came by yesterday as the exterminator, he's also in sales. Everybody is in sales. There's only one business problem. Now at this point, I have to apologize to the other consultants who are in this session. I'm about to give away one of our biggest secrets. There's only one business problem, one. And that problem is communication. And in fact, in interpersonal relationships, most of those problems hinge from communication. It takes a lot of different forms, it takes a lot of different formats, but we're talking about virtual presentations, virtual communication. We need to understand what communication really is. So as we look at virtual communication, what we are finding is we can go to the next level in human interaction using virtual communication. Now the word I want you to home in on here is interaction. The key to distinguishing your virtual presentations from others, from everybody else, is the use of interaction. Now think about it. When we are communicating, we are interacting with other people. consciously and subconsciously. A study came out of the UK about 3 years ago that said now more than 90% of our communication happens at the subconscious subliminal level. Choice of words, intonation of the voice, body language. So what we want to look at is we're now teaching, selling, communicating virtually. What changes do we need to make in order to capitalize on that? It's human interaction. Here are a couple of things you might want to hang on to as we go through the material. Principles rarely change. Principles rarely change, but trends change regularly, and fads come and go. It doesn't mean that we don't capitalize on a fad. If there's a way we can do that profitably or productively, let's do it. But when we look at trends, we know that we are either going to get on the bus or we're not going to get on the bus. And if we get on the bus late, we're not going to have much of a ride. So as we look at virtual communications and taking them to the next level in sales and in every other profession, we want to look at how can we improve that? How can my next one be better than the last one? So what do people hear when we communicate? Right now, there's a couple of hundred people in this session, which means I will deliver a couple of hundred presentations. What you hear is more important than what I say. What your customers hear is more important than what you sell. What your audience hears is more important than what you are trying to communicate. Let's see if we can figure out how that happens. So we look at what other people hear. Here we have a typical conversation. This person is giving a message. It's crisp, it's clear in their mind. But this message was crafted using three major influences: education, experience, and environment. Education, experience, and environment. Education is everything that you have learned formally and informally. So it's every course you took when you were in school. It's the article that you read yesterday. Experience is any event in your life that impacts the way that you think. Any event in your life that impacts the way that you think. And then environment is how you choose to live, the friends that you have, the influences you allow into your mind, the programs that you watch on TV, how well you take care of yourself physically, mentally, and spiritually. All of that is the environment. If you were to list out your education, experience, and environment criteria, is there anybody else on the planet that has the same set that you have? Absolutely not. We are all totally unique. So that message, as clear as we think it is, has passed through those filters for us. And then it goes over to the other individual, and that should be a clear message, except what happens? It goes through their filters: education, experience, and environment. So while we think we are delivering a clear and concise message, it's actually being heard and muddied and maybe convoluted a bit based on what they have experienced in their life, based on who they are and how they hear. So now we're having to do virtually what we used to do face-to-face, and we're trying to figure out how do we make best use of that. Very quickly, list the 5 senses. What are the 5 senses? Number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. For most people, 3 come immediately. The 4th one takes a moment, and the 5th one we actually have to think about. The reason for that is human nature doesn't change. It's just the way our brains function. If we understand how our minds are working, and we can translate that or transpose that to how the customer's mind is probably working, will our communication improve? Probably so. How many of the senses can we use on a face-to-face call? Back in the old days, salespeople used to show up with a bag of donuts and offer to get a cup of coffee for the buyer, not realizing they were adding 2 senses to the presentation, which is taste and smell. We have verbal communication, we have visual communication, and we have touch. Virtual communication, by the way, is not new. We've been doing it for decades. We did it with a telephone, telemarketing, telesales. When we talk on the phone, that's a virtual presentation that only engages one of the senses, of course, that's audio. And now with virtual presentations, we also have video. Could we add something else? That's what we're going to talk about today. Interaction, building more interaction into our presentation and doing it consciously, doing it intentionally, doing it deliberately, doing it professionally, that's what can set one presentation apart from another. Let's talk about Viva. Viva is something that I was working on prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic and the response to the pandemic caused me to have to accelerate what's going on. Viva breaks down a lot of barriers in the communication world when we're doing virtual communications. You see, there are barriers when we're trying to communicate with a video camera that's unfamiliar to us. There are barriers when we're trying to communicate with technology we don't really understand. There are barriers when we're wondering, is this really working as well as I thought it would work? So we look at this and say, okay, what is Viva? It began as virtual, interactive, value-added selling. I teach value-added selling. If you're not in sales, very quickly, there's two ways to sell: value-added selling and commodity selling. Commodity selling is built on the premise that all things are equal, therefore I have to sell on price. Whatever the customer's willing to pay, that's what I'm willing to take. Value-added selling builds on the premise that we can differentiate our product or our service, our company against the competition, ourselves against other people, to the point where the customer will see enough value to pay us even more. So value-added selling means we add value to the transaction. We add value for the other individual. When you think about your next virtual presentation, what value will you be bringing to the people who are participating? In other words, with them. What's in it for them? What's in it for me is all they're thinking about. And if you can understand the value that you bring, why would they not engage with you and engage with you the way you would like for them to? Well, since then, value-added selling became value-added leadership, value-added customer service. It's all about concentrating on the other individual. Let's break down what Viva is really all about, taking it one word at a time. Virtual, interactive, value-added, selling, customer service, leadership, whatever. Let's look at virtual. Virtual is technology dependent. Virtual is technology dependent. In the world that I live in, the speaking world, consulting world, training world, we're looking at a lot of new technologies right now. Now, the one I have homed in on, I actually have 4. This is one of them where I have the screen behind me. And that way, when I'm delivering a presentation and using PowerPoint, especially with Zoom, there's no lag. There's no fluttering. There's no problem with the users all seeing the same thing at the same time. Also, the bandwidth doesn't really matter because the video signal is going out, so I know a little bit about the technology. There's a couple of geniuses when it comes to technology in this session, by the way. I'm kind of surprised they're here. They're better than I am at this stuff. They are looking at hardware and software. And new software comes out. They began with OBS, and there's a bunch of add-ins that go with that. They're looking at all the different devices that can be used. Well, here's my rule of thumb. Don't do it just because you can. Don't do it just because you can. What we want to do is use what we understand. Use what we understand. Whatever you understand in the technological world, use it. If you're comfortable with a video camera, a webcam attached to your laptop, and that's all you're comfortable with, use it. You'll notice that when we're presenting, we're distracted. We're wondering, is this coming across? Is that working? It's better if we have some agent that will help us or some assistant that'll make sure all the technology's working just right. But use what you understand. Just because you see somebody else doing it doesn't mean you need to go get a monitor. Use what you understand. And then update it regularly. Update it regularly. If you're using Zoom, you know that about every 5th time you open it, they have a new update. They have something else that they're changing. So you want to update it regularly. Keep it professional. And if you're taking notes and you wrote the word professional down, please draw a line under it and a circle around it. This is where virtual presentations start getting a bad rap. We're not doing them professionally. We'll talk about that more in great detail. And then follow the protocols. Follow the protocols. There are protocols for virtual presentations, and you'll want to learn them and use them. A protocol is you talk to the camera, not to the computer. A protocol is you test everything before you get online. A protocol is you're sensitive to the needs of the people in the audience. And there are plenty of resources out there where you can find this information. Again, we're talking about the high points, the things you want to consider. Do you need to learn more about protocols? Google it, you will find it. Virtual presentation protocols, it's out there. So like in the camping analogy, what kind of tent or device do we want for shelter? What kind of food are we going to take? Well, here, start looking at all the different categories and deciding what you're going to do next. Let's look at interactive, because this is where the fun begins. Interactive is real-time customer engagement. Real-time customer engagement. Interactive in the past, if we were live with the customer, we could ask questions, they could answer, we could show them things, we could hand them a brochure, we could engage with them. But with virtual, we think we've lost a lot of that capability, and maybe we have, maybe we haven't. We want to interact with the customer in real time as we are presenting. So we can ask questions, we can do polls, we can take advantage of those elements of whatever platform you are using. But there are other ways to interact as well. There are interactive PowerPoints, and I'm going to demonstrate that. In fact, part of this presentation will be done with an interactive PowerPoint, and I'll explain that in detail when we get there. If you downloaded the handout, you found that we can do interactive PDFs, for Pete's sake. You can navigate through a PDF. You can add notes to a PDF. I'm doing a couple of sessions next week. I'm doing them live, and I will send ahead of time the interactive PDF so that the participants can take notes on their device, their tablet, their laptop, or whatever they're traveling with. And I will also have a printed version. Why is that? Because we have to use the technology with which we are familiar. We only use those things that we're comfortable using. Then let's look at value added. What is value added? In the world of sales, value added is used to overcome or eliminate the price objection. In other words, if I can show the customer enough value, and I can do a cost justification, I can show them the value of paying me more for my object than they are paying my competitor, they'll buy from me. So the value add focus is what's in it for them. You may remember Zig Ziglar, who was fond of saying, you can have anything you want if you help enough other people have what they want. Well, that's what we're talking about. Don't let the virtual presentation be the show. Don't let your message be all that is said. Allow the customer to interact so that you can understand clearly what's important to them, why it's important, and what else you could be doing. We added a Chuckism actually this week. It's Chuckism number 73. Chuckism number 73 says, their outcome creates our income. Their outcome creates our income. In other words, if my customer buys from me and they are more profitable, they're more productive, they're more successful in some way, that's going to create income for me. If the people in your virtual presentation are more successful, then that's going to bring income for you. Income can be money. Income can be job satisfaction. Income can be watching other people grow. So however you define income, it can increase when we help the customer improve their results. We're going to look at content and delivery. We're going to begin with delivery. We normally do it the other way around, but we're going to look at delivery very quickly. Your message, whatever your message is for your virtual listeners, virtual viewers, doesn't change at the core. The way we deliver it will, but it doesn't change at the core. You are still saying and doing whatever you were saying and doing before. This is a process change. So the core of the message is not going to change, but the way you deliver it will. And there are three basic types of messages. There's live, and we've all spoken in front of live audiences, and we're comfortable with that. We know how to do that because we've done it before. And now there are virtual audiences. So we're trying to figure out, how do we modify our message and delivery in order to appeal to the virtual environment? The tough one is the hybrid. Any professional speaker will tell you this is the toughest environment in which to speak, in which to communicate. Hybrid means some of the people are there live and in front of you, and others are participating virtually. It's very difficult. Here is the first major issue in virtual communications. I call it nostrils and ceiling fans. Nostrils and ceiling fans. If you've been on a Zoom presentation where someone had a ceiling fan behind them and the fan was running, that fluttering on the screen drew your eye over and over and over again. I was speaking in California when the lockdown came. I was doing 3 days of presentations for the same client, and in the middle of day 2 they said we're going to lock down. So I headed for the airport, but the client said, is there any way you could get a hotel room here and do tomorrow's presentation locally or virtually? I said, well, we'll make it happen. I didn't have a webcam, I just had my laptop, and this laptop, like too many of them, has the camera down near the keyboard. So what is the camera angle? Nostrils and ceiling fans. So I went everywhere looking for a webcam, could not find one. I did the thing where you prop it up on books and so forth. I did have to make a virtual background because I was in a terrible hotel for lighting and background. So I put all that kind of stuff together and made a presentation as well as I could. If you don't have a webcam, get one. Get one and practice with it. As you can probably tell, I am not using my laptop camera for this presentation. And again, whatever you are comfortable with, whatever you understand, use that. What will your audience see? Here's the rule of thumb that I use. When you're ready to do your presentation, look at the screen and see how you come across and ask yourself, would my significant other take that as a picture, frame it, and hang it in their house or hang it in their office? I don't think so. If it's not suitable for framing, let's just assume it's not suitable for Zoom. An issue that's going away is this one. No virtual backgrounds. Let's stop using virtual backgrounds. There's a couple of reasons why. Even with the most sophisticated technology, and even in high-def TV stations and TV networks, you will see that virtual background, if it's not properly lit and perfectly lit, creates all kinds of problems. In fact, if you're using one of the built-in virtual backgrounds and you turn your head, your face will disappear, you'll become a zombie. But the primary reason I'm against virtual backgrounds is this. It's the first untrue thing we say to our audience. You're not in front of the Golden Gate Bridge. You are not piloting the Starship Enterprise, and you're not on a beach in Hawaii with the palm trees swaying. Come up with a background that makes sense. What is a background that makes sense? Well, it's one with no distractions. If this person here is on a virtual call, they're here, their computer is here, what are the viewers thinking? More than 90% of our communication happens at the subconscious subliminal level. What they're thinking is, he shouldn't have a pen in his mouth, or he's only got one sleeve rolled up, or what does that post-it note back there say? Be very careful of your background. Well, if we're not going to use a virtual background, what option do we have? Behind this TV is a paneled wall. If I'm not using the screen, I have the paneled wall and the tree. I also have a pop-up. Remember when we used to go to trade shows and they have these pop-ups? Consider getting a pop-up. If you're a corporate leader, have one for each of your people that do significant customer interactions from home. The pop-up can become the background. It can have your logo. You remember trade shows, right? If you worked a trade show, at the end of the day, your feet were sore, but you had a bunch of leads. And if you were just visiting the trade show, at the end of the day, your feet were sore, but you had a bunch of brochures. Now we're doing virtual trade shows, and they are proving to be a little too successful for some people. You can't replace the face-to-face, and there are times when you need to touch and feel the items, and you need to have a long engagement face-to-face. So the trade shows are not going away. But we're finding now that we can do interim trade shows. We can engage our customers more often and more frequently than we ever could before because of virtual technology. Be prepared. If you were a Boy Scout, you already know this, be prepared. The worst thing that can happen is to get on a virtual presentation and have some glitch that slows things down. Learn as much as you can about virtual presentations. CQI, continuous quality improvement, applies to learning as well. Send advanced instructions. Dumb it down. What is common sense for you may be brand new for somebody else. Do not assume anything. So the more detailed instructions you can give, the better. Those who already understand those things will skim over them. It will not be a problem. Anticipate glitches. Professional speakers know that when we go into an arena where we're going to speak, or we go into a conference room where we're going to speak, we anticipate the glitches. If the PowerPoint doesn't work, what will I do? If the lights go out, what will I do? One of my events was in the Los Angeles area, downtown hotel. A man came in with a knife who wanted a hostage, and he was being chased by 2 members of the LAPD. Now, I looked in the speaker's manual for hostage, and there was nothing in there about that. On the fly, I had to think of, what do we do now? Anticipate as many of the glitches as you can, and just assume something's going to come along you never heard of before or you never saw before. So anticipate the glitches, and then practice, 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 practice. If you and someone else in your organization is going to advance and do more sophisticated virtual presentations, practice with each other. There's a scripture that says iron sharpens iron. Well, you want to use that. You want to have your best people helping you become even better and doing even more. Okay, now let's talk about content. We looked at delivery. Let's look at content and see what we might want to use to develop even more rich or robust or appropriate content for a virtual presentation, and have the content be interactive. Now I'm going to use an interactive PowerPoint. If you downloaded the handout, you saw an interactive PDF. Let's look at an interactive PowerPoint. This is a capability that is built into PowerPoint. It's called a zoom slide, or a summary zoom. And there are different sections of this PowerPoint presentation, and these are the topics of each of those sections. And so if I click on one of these, that's where we can go. In a live presentation, especially in a boardroom scenario, I would hand this remote to someone sitting at the table and say, click one of these. What would you like to talk about? In some virtual presentations, we can have people there pick out what they want to talk about. So think about your topic and what you think is most important for the people that are attending your session, and then put those in different sections. I'm using a touch screen. This is actually a tablet. It's a Surface. That doesn't really matter, but you'll notice that when I touch the slide, it zooms up to full screen. And now with this capability, as I move through the slides, it's only going to show the content behind that particular topic heading. So let's talk about a sales process methodology which can easily be changed to a communication process technology, or a presentation process technology. Ask any professional speaker how long they prepare for a 60-minute presentation, and you'll probably find it's about a half a week. We think through, we start looking, we practice. Zig was still practicing his presentations in the hotel room in the morning before he would go down and do a presentation he did for 50 or 60 years. We cannot overstress the need to practice, practice, practice. So I'm going to give you 5 steps. This is what we use in sales. It can be used in any presentation, whether you're a leader, whether you're a manager, whether you're any position in your organization. This is how we create a solid virtual presentation. The methodology that I teach is called plush selling, P-L-U-S-H. There are 5 principles behind a successful presentation. This is preparation. This is before the camera turns on. This is before we flip on the microphone. 5 principles behind a successful presentation, also 5 principles behind a successful value-added sale. A successful value-added sale, by the way, is a sale that we close without quoting the price. A sale that we close using nothing but value so the customer agrees to the transaction, and then maybe we discuss the price. I believe this is a science. Sales is a science. Presentation is a science. You may think that some people are good at sales because they were born with the gift of gab. It's not true. There are very quiet people who are very successful in sales. And you may think that there's born presenters. What I teach in my presentation training is this: if you're not nervous before you stand up and speak, you're probably going to bomb. It's that nerve that gives us the extra energy, the extra edge. And so if sales is a science and presentation is a science, let's look at some of the key factors behind the science. There are 5 principles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, represented by the letters in the word plush, P-L-U-S-N-H. It's an easy word for you to remember. If you had your choice of a plush office or a not plush office, which would you choose? Plush, which is why your company gives you plush offices. If you had your choice of a plush company car or an ordinary company car, which would you choose? Plush, which is why your company cars are typically Mercedes and Jaguars. So take the letters in the word plush. By the way, do you know why I said that? It'll help the word plush stick in your mind. That's what we do. Okay, 5 principles. They must be accomplished thoroughly. There's a real temptation when we get into a presentation to start skipping over stuff or to fail to say something. I worked with an insurance company, a life insurance company once, and before I spoke, they gave awards to the top 10 salespeople. And I was standing in the back of the room there with the president of the company, and the VP of sales was up there, and they called out number 10. It was a gray-haired guy like me. I thought, yeah, there you go, a real champion, sure enough. Number 9 was a child, some kid in his 30s or something. He's one of their top salespeople. And I thought, well, this is a company with a future because they've got this young person here, and he's going to help them go to the next level. Number 8, another seasoned vet like me. Number 7 was a child. I think she was maybe in her late 20s, early 30s, one of their highest producers, and all the rest of them were these young people. And so I asked the president, I said, what's going on here? He said, it's the darndest thing. He said, our presentation is done in the home, and it's done in front of mom and dad, and we have a tabletop flip chart presentation because some people don't trust a presentation on a laptop. I'd never heard that before. But they don't trust a laptop, so they want to see the paper version. He said, after our salespeople have been selling for so long, instead of turning over 1 page at a time, ready for this, and realizing a 72% closing rate, try that one on. They start turning over 2 pages at a time because they've known this stuff. They said it so many times, and the customer stopped buying. So don't skip over anything. Thoroughly and in order. Start with the P. Don't go to the L until you've thoroughly done the P, and then you'll know how to go to the L. Don't skip over and go to the S until you've gone through the U. So thoroughly and in order. The P is positioning. Positioning. Who is your contact? Who is in the audience? This is critical. There's no one size fits all. There's no one presentation that's going to work for everybody. So who are you presenting to? What are their needs? What are their desires? What do they want to accomplish? And if you haven't done your homework ahead of time, then begin your virtual presentation with some kind of survey or Q&A or Q&I, and start asking them what's most important to you. What would you like to achieve in our time together? Hopefully you've done that before you have scheduled the virtual presentation. Who's your contact? This is critical. How will they be impacted? If you know what impact you're going to have on people, won't you figure out who to ask to come to your virtual presentation? We're in the business of helping people. We're in the business of helping people go to the next level. And then, what do they want? We really want to have this information before we even schedule the virtual presentation. If I don't know the purpose of the call, let's don't have the call. I used to challenge salespeople. I was turning around a company once, and I would stop salespeople in the morning, and I would say, who are you calling on this morning? And Acme Widgets, great. What are the top 3 goals Acme Widgets has set for 2020, and what obstacles have they identified that might prevent them from making those goals? What did the salesperson say? I don't know. 2 rules just kicked in. Rule number 1, you cannot make that call until you can answer those questions. And then rule number 2, you cannot reschedule the call. Which means what? Between right now and when I told the customer I would be there, I need to be able to answer these questions. Remember the old adage, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care? Go online, go to LinkedIn, go to the social networks, and try to figure out who are these people and what's most important to them. And then you know how to communicate with them, then you know what to communicate with them. Listening is a function of asking. It's amazing what people will tell us. It's amazing what people will give us if we just ask. What will you ask? Because whatever you ask creates immediate interaction. Do you know why? The human mind cannot not respond to a question. The human mind cannot not respond to a question. If I ask you a question, your brain kicks into gear, you can't stop it. What does a Hershey bar look like? Now try to keep the Hershey bar out of your mind. It pops up, you push it down, it'll pop right back up again. When the Hershey bar appeared in your mind, by the way, was it vertical or horizontal? Try to keep the word horizontal out of your mind, you can't do it. You see, it's not the gift of gab. It's the gift of genuine interest. It's the gift of trying to help other people achieve what they would like to achieve. That's what makes a great salesperson. So what will you ask? What questions are you going to ask? And then unique is your differentiation. What sets you apart from everyone else? When you think about structuring your content, what will be there that's different from what's been in previous sessions? Your customers will no longer compare your virtual presentation to that of your competitors. They will now compare your virtual presentation to that of every other webinar they've watched, personal and professional. If they're going to YouTube and seeing some quality presentations, if they're subscribing to a channel where some nice productions are being done, and then we show up with nostrils and ceiling fans, how does that come across to the customer? We need to differentiate ourselves with every aspect of our virtual presentation. Are you making a list of some areas you might want to improve, some areas you might want to change? Good for you. And then solution. We're in the problem-solving business. That's what I do and that's what you do. Ultimately, every business exists and succeeds by solving problems for other people. There's 2 kinds of problems. There's the problem that keeps us from going up to zero, problems that are holding us down and giving us all kinds of losses. And then there are problems that keep us from excelling, from reaching the stars. Either way, they're problems. And when we talk about problems with our customers, we want to find out what they think their problems are. I've done 5,000 presentations all over the world. I've spoken in all 50 states. And before each presentation, I do a needs analysis. What's going on in your organization? What would you like to do differently? What are the top 3 problems facing your organization? And do you know, in all of those presentations, not one customer has ever told me what their problems were. My first consulting client, after leaving AT&T, I sat down with him and I said, what are the top 3 problems facing your business? He said, we've got one major problem. I got the paper out, I got the pen. I said, yes, sir, what is that? He said, attrition. So I wrote down attrition. I said, what was your attrition last year? He said, 112%. Now that's turning over more than the entire head count in the course of a year. Not everybody left, but they had a high turnover rate. Is that a problem? Nope. It's a symptom. What's causing it? You see, it's a tragedy if you know what other people think is a problem and you're able to recognize it as a symptom, or better, you're able to help them understand that it's a symptom. The value of your virtual presentation just went through the ceiling. We're helping them go to the next level. We're helping them overcome their shortcomings, helping them achieve what they would like to achieve, which brings us to the H in plush, which is help. Helping means giving selflessly, giving without expectation of compensation. If I give you something thinking I'm going to get something in return, a quid pro quo, that's not helping. That's investing. Sometimes investments pay off, sometimes they don't. We give selflessly. How do you do that with someone? You read an article and you think, I think this person would benefit from that. You email it to them. There's nothing in it for you. You're helping them go to the next level. Now you'll notice when I finish any section in this process, we go right back to the menu. And now I can look at my watch, I can look at this, see how much time we have left, and I can see which of these should we be looking at with the time that we have left. So what I'm going to use is listening. This is one of the best kept secrets in sales, in interpersonal communication, and in holding relationships together. Now, by the way, relationship selling is a redundant term. All selling is relationship selling. Companies don't do business with companies, people do business with people. Listening is a skill. Listening is a powerful, powerful tool. That's why I say the gift of gab is not that important. It's the ability to ask the right question the right way and come up with the right information. The human mind cannot not respond to a question. So let's start looking at some questioning concepts. How can you construct better questions for your next virtual call? How can you construct better questions for your next virtual call? The first one is called the opening question. The opening question is not how we greet the customer. The opening question is how we move into the focus of the meeting. This morning, I used an opening question. I could also have used a startling statement. In fact, I used both. But an opening question, I used it because we're going to dig into the content immediately. We don't have time for chit-chat with this many people in the session. So my opening question was, is virtual presentations here to stay? Would you like to make better virtual presentations? And then the startling statement example that I used is, finish this statement for me. If I always do what I've always done, most of you said I'll always give what I've always got because that's what we believe for decades, and then change that. That's a startling statement. So you want to open with something that gives the customer's mind a chance to focus. We want their mind to lock in. The worst word you can use to open a presentation, you might want to write this down, is And we hear so many of them. Let's talk about, you've lost them already. In fact, we know that in professional speaking, when we walk out on stage after the introduction, maybe there's some applause, we have about 7 to 9 seconds to hook the audience. And that typically has to be done with body language, facials, and that kind of thing. Then the audiences today will give us up to 3 minutes. If we don't have them engaged by then, they will physically get up and walk out. Time is too valuable. So come up with an opening question, something that will stir their mind and get them thinking on the track you would like for them to. Introduce a third party. Here's how you introduce a third party. Ask the same question, if you have a question that you're not really sure the people would like to answer or would be comfortable asking, introduce a third party. So if I were to ask you a question, so what do you think about this shirt that I'm wearing? Well, you might be my friend and you might want to say, this is just okay. The way you're dressed for this is not the way I would dress for this. But if I introduce a third party, you will speak openly. So what do you think the other participants are thinking about the shirt that I'm wearing? See how it works? You're off the hook. It's not your words, it's these nebulous other people on the webinar. Then the 3-question concept. I love this one. If you've heard the expression, we get truth on the installment plan. We get truth on the installment plan. Sometimes people have problems being blunt with us, especially the better they know us or the more they don't want to hurt our feelings. Ask the same question 3 times, 3 different ways. Take the third answer. You'll be real close to the truth. Ask the same question 3 times, but reword it 3 different ways. And then take the third answer, you'll be real close to the truth. For instance, You sit down with some of your customers. Let's say you're in customer service and you have several of your users out there, and you say, "How are we doing?" You know what the number one response is going to be? Fine. Fine has no definition. Fine is that thin line between we're doing great and we're doing awful. All they're doing is saying fine. Do you know why? Because they believe if they say fine, you'll move on to the next question. We haven't gotten any information we can use. So let's reword the question. How are we doing? Fine. Well, how could we serve you better? First answers are knee-jerk. They don't even think about it, they just spit it out. Second answers tend to be unrealistic. Third answers get close to the truth. How could we serve you better? Oh, serve us better. Well, all right. Gold plate your product, cut your delivery time, and reduce your price. If we could do those things, we would have done them a long time ago. Ask it a third time. How are we doing? Fine. How could we serve you better? Cut your price. You're a sharp business person. If you ran our organization, let's say for 90 days, what are the first three things you would change? What are the first three things you would change? And now you start getting the valuable information that you want. You'll hear about assumptive questions. The way you build an assumptive question, by the way, is you write a question out. This is what I'm going to ask them. Now, if I get the ideal, best, perfect answer to that question, what will my next question be? Start with that one. It'll have an assumption in it. Instead of saying, you want to buy something today? And I want them to say, yes. What am I going to say after that? Oh, what would you like to buy today? You start with what would you like to buy today? And there's an assumption built in that what? They want to buy. So start thinking through your questions. Think through the dialogue. Don't worry so much about how you're going to dress and what you're going to look like. Think through what the customer is going to hear. This is one of my favorite questions. I call it the $75,000 question. I call it that because I used one question 1 year to generate $75,000 in consulting fees. I still get letters on this. Here are 3 words that will make you rich, famous, and successful. The 3 words are, I don't know. It's okay for you to look the customer in the eye and say, I don't know. But that's not a question, so let's make it a question. I don't know, what do you think? I don't know, what do you think? Why should I read that book you recommended me? Well, I don't know. What are you trying to achieve in this area? What problems or issues have you ever thought about this? We put it back on them. The reason we will do something is probably not the reason someone else will do something. So we say, I don't know, what do you think? And it takes us right back into a dialogue, right back into interaction with the customer. I think we have time for about one question, and let me look and see if we have any. And I don't see any, so we're going to do something even better. If you would, put your paperwork aside, put your handouts aside, and let me talk to you, Chuck and you. Most people are aware of 1 in 5 of the people they influence, 1/5 of the people they influence, because they say something to someone and then they pass it on to someone else and they pass it on to someone else. You're in this webinar because you want to grow to the next level. There's something else you want to achieve in your life. You're a mover, you're a shaker, you're a grower. Now, you probably don't see yourself as successful as other people see you. This happens over and over again. So here's what happens. You're influencing people you're unaware that you are influencing, and then at some point, they come to you and say, how did you get to be successful? How did you learn to do that? They ask salespeople all the time, so you go out and talk to total strangers and try to get their money from them, is that right? So it looks like it's extraordinary behavior to them, but to us it's something that we actually enjoy doing. Murphy of Murphy's Law, if anything can go wrong, it will go wrong in order to do the most damage possible. Murphy's would tell you that they're going to ask you that question at the end of a bad day, in the middle of a bad week, following a bad month. You looked in the mirror that morning and your self-esteem began to sag. Who do you think you are? What makes you think you could handle a position like this? What makes you think your goals and dreams could ever come true? And so your self-esteem is sagging, and now they come and say, how did you get to be successful? You know what your human nature is going to cause you to do? You'll say something like, oh, shucks, it was nothing. It was blind, dumb luck. And I want to submit to you that is the cruelest thing you can say to that person at that moment. Here's what's going on in their mind. They think you're here and they're there. That is not true. We're all right here. Everybody's the same. Everybody's doing their job. They think you're here and they're there. If you say, oh, shucks, it was nothing, then what they hear is, well, if you're nothing, what does that make me? Sub something or other. It was blind, dumb luck. Oh, okay, well, I'll just go back over here to my little job and wait for some blind, dumb luck. Until you come up with your answer, you can use mine, but I want you to come up with yours very soon, no later than the next couple of days. I had the chance to quit, and I didn't take it. Everyone in this session had an opportunity to throw in the towel. Everyone in this session was told at some point in your life you could not, should not, would not do those things that you're doing right now, for Pete's sake. And you overcame it. You had the chance to quit. There are no extraordinary people. There are only ordinary people that are doing things other people perceive to be extraordinary. And not giving up, believe it or not, is considered to be extraordinary behavior in this culture. Now see, the people you're influencing need to understand the road to your success was not a smooth, easy trip. Point A to point B, good for me. They need to understand that you had peaks and you had valleys. The valley may not have been as deep as the last one, but it was a valley, and then another peak, and another valley, and another peak, and another valley. The reason they need to hear that from you is they're going to hit peaks and start going down. And if they think your road was a straight trip, they're going to say, okay, well, I'm going back to the beginning. No good for me. Worked for you, didn't work for me. The secret to success. I was AT&T's top salesperson one year. They made me a sales manager. Typically, if you take your best salesperson, make them a sales manager, you get two things, which is less sales and bad management. So on Friday, I'm an account exec. On Monday, I'm a national account manager. I called a meeting. I thought that's what managers did. You called a meeting. Take what could have been productive selling time and call people in the conference room. I had no idea what they were going to ask. I just knew I wasn't qualified to answer them. They all had the same question. You were top salesperson last year. I want to be top salesperson this year. How did you do it? I said, education. Do what they taught us in sales school. They said, we're doing that. You're doing something different. What is it? I said, learn the products, experience. They said, we know the products inside and out. You're doing something different. What is it? Took us almost 2 hours. You know what we figured out? I never gave up. That's it. It's not because I have a stellar character and I'm a person of perseverance or whatever. Think about it. 10 years prior to going into sales at AT&T, I was in an entry-level job. When you're in an entry-level job and somebody tells you to jump, what do? On the way up, you say, how high? 2 years prior to that, I was in the military. In the military, when they tell you to do something, what do? You do it. I have 12 years of conditioned behavior. I went to sales. My boss said, go sell this stuff to those people. What did I think I was supposed to do? Sell this stuff to those people. I did everything they taught me in sales school. They didn't teach me some things. We had the highest price, oldest technology, and slowest delivery. Other than that, we were pretty darn competitive, but they were throwing me out on my ear. I would go back and try again, never with the same story twice. People ask me, how did you earn a Bronze Star in Vietnam? If you haven't been in combat, it's difficult to explain, but the night they said that I earned it, the odds were insurmountable, situation hopeless, mission had become impossible. I bring those three things up because there are people in this session right now who have faced all three of those in life, in business, but here they are. They're here trying to go to the next level. That night, my machine gunner was no longer firing. And I looked over at the grunts that had gone out with us, and some of them were no longer firing. A tank had gone out with us that night, and I looked over, and the turret on the tank was going around backwards and then going back into facing the enemy, firing and going backwards again. They're going for the last of their ammo, but we never gave up. See, that's it. The secret to success is the secret to survival sometimes. There are no extraordinary people. There are only ordinary people who are doing things that other people perceive to be extraordinary. Teach your extraordinary self to people, and everything else will fall into place. I appreciate your attention on this session. May God continue to bless your success. Thank you.